A woman was shocked to discover that her boyfriend had sculpted her most seductive pose in bed, displayed it in the most prominent spot of the exhibition, and even attached her name to it. As she stood in a daze, hearing people discuss the statue without realizing it was her boyfriend suddenly appeared behind her. He cheerfully walked up to her, proudly showing off his soon-to-be award-winning work, completely disregarding her feelings. The woman said nothing and turned away. Later, the boyfriend accused Nabai, saying, "Being my artwork embarrasses you? I only do this with the ones I love." Nabai felt deeply hurt. She pleaded, "You should have at least discussed it with me first." Yet somehow the entire situation seemed to be turned into her fault. The next day, her friend tried to comfort her. Artists don't casually choose models. Hearing this eased Nabai's heart a little. But that same night, someone warned her that her boyfriend's reputation wasn't good. Determined, she decided to check his studio unannounced. Sure enough, the moment she opened the door, she caught him with one of her students. Remembering his words from the night before, Nabai realized she had been played. She immediately decided to end the relationship. That night, she went to a bar to drown her sorrows. A very handsome playboy walked in, attracting stares from many women. Yet he walked straight toward Nabai. She denied his charm at first, but as Jun, the man, left, she found herself glancing back at him. Then he unexpectedly returned and sat beside her again. Looking into his face, she listened as he spoke with earnest sincerity. Words that might have sounded cheesy from anyone else melted her defenses. But this was only the beginning. John invited her to play darts. Skilled as he was, he guided her, using the excuse to hold her wrist and rest his other hand lightly on her shoulder. The subtle physical contact relaxed Nabai. When the dart hit the bullseye, she happily celebrated with him. Step by step, he grew bolder, touching her forehead, complimenting her smile, leaving her both shy and flattered. Finally, he drew a simple sketch on her wrist, saying it was a keepsake. "If next time we meet it's still here, it means it's fate." Most men in his position would draw a butterfly. When she asked why, he explained, "Butterflies drink nectar all their lives. I hope your days are just as sweet." He blew gently on the ink, brushed her skin unintentionally, and revealed his butterfly tattoo, sparking her curiosity further. Under his gaze, Nabai's heart raced uncontrollably. When he leaned in, she instinctively resisted. He quickly softened the moment by patting her head, winning back her favor. Later, he led her outside to watch the night sky. He offered her a cigarette, but since she didn't smoke, another woman approached to ask for one, clearly drawn by his looks. To stake her claim, Nabai put the last cigarette between her lips, even though she wasn't a smoker. After the woman left, the male lead gazed at her tenderly and invited her back to his place to study. Nabai hesitated, excusing herself to the restroom. When she returned, she overheard him speaking sweetly on the phone with someone else. Her heart sank instantly, and she left without looking back. The next day, Nabai cut her hair short, enjoying her newfound independence and focusing on her studies. But while shopping for pens, she heard the male lead's voice. Rushing outside, she found he was already gone. Only then did she realize how deeply she had fallen for him. Hoping to distract herself, she joined her friend for a social gathering, only for fate to make them meet again. When her friend selfishly snatched the last piece of bread she wanted, the male lead pretended he was craving it too, asking the waiter to bring a plate and placing it in front of Nabai. While everyone else chatted, his eyes remained fixed on her. She began to believe his feelings might truly be sincere this time. But when a waitress left her phone on the table, the male lead's overly flirtatious way of returning it reminded Nabai that all his moves were just part of the same old routine. Sensing her unease, he pulled her away to buy ice cream and kept her company on the way back. The male lead asked Nabai why she had suddenly left without saying goodbye, then casually placed his hand on her shoulder. By chance, he noticed the butterfly sketch still on her wrist and smiled with satisfaction. Nabai, innocent and hopeful, began to imagine a future with him, convincing herself that the male lead was her true destiny. She stayed awake at night, afraid of missing a single message from him. The next day in class, in order to create a chance encounter with the male lead, Nabai deliberately suggested going out with her classmates during break. But not only did she fail to see him, She also missed classwork and was harshly scolded by her professor. On the way home, a classmate realized she had forgotten her wireless earphones, so Nabai volunteered to go back and return them. But instead of the classroom, she rushed straight to the sculpture studio where the male lead might be. There, she only found his massive butterfly sculpture, his award-winning work. After many days of waiting, her dream finally came true. One evening after class, when she was alone in the room, the male lead appeared behind her. He knew she had been looking for him in the studio and came especially for her. Embarrassed, Nabai denied she had come to see him, but looking at the face she couldn't get out of her mind, she impulsively smeared green paint on his cheek. The two of them ended up playfully chasing each other, drawing laughter from passing classmates. That night, as Nabai worked on her sculpture assignment, the male lead sketched her face. On their way back, cherry blossoms fell all over the ground. In the romantic setting, Nabai stretched, and the male lead suddenly pulled her arms back, saying that after sculpting for so long, this would help her relax, then naturally embraced her in his arms. Her best friend warned her, the male lead never calls anyone his girlfriend, he only keeps things ambiguous. But Nabai believed he treated her differently. That night, she went with him to a bar. He pulled her close, even nipping at her ear. The atmosphere grew more intimate, and Nabai wrapped her arms around his neck. The two were about to kiss deeply when someone accidentally bumped into her, breaking the moment. Embarrassed, she excused herself to the restroom. When she returned, she saw Cha-Cha inviting the male lead out. He glanced at Nabai, then refused Cha-Cha while rubbing her head affectionately. But Cha-Cha was undeterred. She grabbed Nabai's hand and asked her to join instead. To Nabai's shock, she noticed the exact same butterfly sketch on Cha-Cha's arm. Realizing the truth, she turned and walked away. But the male lead, unwilling to lose his prey, chased after her, explaining that the sketch was something Cha-Cha had drawn herself. Nabai refused to listen, her face cold as she brushed him off. Back home, sitting on her bed, she couldn't stop wondering what the male lead truly saw her as. After long thought, she decided to cut ties completely. The next time he appeared was in class, when Nabai slipped while modeling for her classmate's sculpture photography project. The male lead rushed to her first, but she quickly brushed him off, saying she wasn't hurt and telling him to go mind his own business. Still, he insisted, "I just wanted to see you." But Nabai no longer believed such sweet words. Even so, faced with his handsome face and gentle persistence, she still found it hard to resist. That night, she went home conflicted, asking herself if the male lead treated every girl the same way. Caught in her emotions, she held back from responding to his messages. Then he called. At first, Nabai's tone was cold and resistant, but under his sweet talk, she found herself smiling unconsciously. The next morning, while she was still asleep, the doorbell rang. At the door stood the male lead, looking urgent. What happened next blurred into an intimate encounter, until her phone alarm rang, jolting her awake. It had all been a dream. She was late for class. Rushing to school, she suddenly remembered it was her period. She messaged a classmate to borrow supplies, but the girl was busy gaming at an internet cafe and didn't see the message. Despite the pain, Nabai forced herself through her class presentation before slipping away. On the empty stairwell, the male lead noticed her discomfort, took off his coat, and gently draped it over her shoulders. Still uneasy about this player, Nabai checked his social media, thousands of female followers. She knew he was dangerous, but holding the coat he had given her, she realized she couldn't let go. Her best friend urged her to stay away from such a man and suggested going together to a party to see his true colors. At the party, before the male lead even arrived, an awkward senior made uncomfortable jokes at Nabai, bringing down the mood. Just then, the male lead walked in. The atmosphere instantly brightened. Girls were drawn to him even without him saying a word. Despite all the attention, the male lead took Nabai aside to drink with her. But the awkward senior followed, asking about their relationship. Nabai was caught off guard and didn't know how to respond. The male lead directly denied that he was dating Nabai, which left her upset. She felt she wasn't important to him and excused herself to the restroom to calm down. Her best friend, not wanting her mood to be ruined, invited a few close friends over. Wanting to shake off the awkward senior, Nabai invited 8 people to her place, including the male lead. They played a spin-the-bottle style game where whoever was chosen had to pick someone to play a mouth-to-mouth game. The loud laughter soon disturbed the neighbors, but once the male lead stepped in, the female neighbor was instantly charmed and said no more. Because of her warning, the game quickly ended. When Nabai went out to throw away the trash, she unexpectedly saw the male lead downstairs, entangled with another girl. Realizing Nabai was watching, he quickly went over to explain that the girl was disappointed not to have played the kissing game with him, so he had granted her a small request. He then teasingly asked Nabai, who also hadn't played with him, whether she felt it was a pity. Embarrassed, Nabai froze. The male lead stepped closer, closing the distance, but Nabai raised her hand to stop him. Then, noticing the stain on his lips, she instinctively reached out to wipe it off, before rising on tiptoe to kiss him herself. After that day, Nabai constantly waited for his messages. She wanted to reach out first but held back, afraid of seeming too eager. Meanwhile, the male lead was busy picking up his ex-girlfriend, Yoon Sol, who had just returned from abroad. Feeling troubled, Nabai wandered the campus and suddenly saw him walking hand in hand with Yoon Sol. The tenderness he showed her pierced Nabai's heart. Embarrassed, she ducked into a convenience store, where she unexpectedly ran into a junior, Shaoen, who had admired her for a long time. They chatted happily. Shaoen not only bought her milk but also asked for her contact information. Unbeknownst to Nabai, the male lead had seen the whole thing. Yoon Sol also noticed the way he gazed at Nabai, and for the first time, felt a sense of crisis. Back home, Nabai was flooded with messages from Shaoen. To her surprise, she enjoyed being pursued. But when she saw that the male lead still hadn't messaged her, her smile faded. The next day, Shaoen brought her fruit and invited her to the movies. Just then, the long-absent male lead suddenly appeared, casually draping his arm over Nabai's shoulder. When he heard they were going to see a romance film, he provocatively commented on it. Angry, Nabai dragged him up to the rooftop, where the two quarreled fiercely about that night before parting unhappily. However, Shaoen overheard everything and told Nabai he didn't mind, inviting her again to the movie. Feeling awkward, Nabai agreed. The two began dating in a more normal way, eating together, taking photos in an escape room, watching movies. Looking at their pictures, Nabai sighed, thinking, "This is the kind of relationship I want." On the way home, Shaoen shyly hugged her, promising to protect her, and even leaned in to kiss her. But as she watched his awkwardness, she couldn't help but think of the male lead's practiced charm and laughed involuntarily. Embarrassed, Shaoen quickly pulled away. Back home, Nabai couldn't help but compare the two men. Wanting to free herself from confusion, she deleted all of the male lead's contact information. The next day, she attended the school festival as promised, only to see Shaoen's girlfriend clinging to his arm. Nabai was stunned. Her shy junior was also a player. She stood frozen in disbelief. From a distance, the male lead witnessed everything. Seeing his target being snatched away, his possessiveness was ignited. That day, he called Nabai again. Hearing her coughing non-stop, genuine worry finally stirred in him, and he decided to take care of her. Nabai wanted to refuse, but her phone died. Losing contact with her, the male lead panicked and even called emergency services. When Nabai returned home with medicine, she was shocked to see the commotion at her door. Startled, she rushed forward, and seeing her safe, the male lead finally breathed in relief. After sending the responders away, he gently touched her forehead to check her condition. Later at home, Nabai regretted her harsh words. Just then, the doorbell rang. The male lead had brought food and insisted she eat before taking her medicine. Looking into his sincere eyes, Nabai's heart softened again, and she invited him in for ramen. Afterward, when she grew sleepy, he scooped her up in a princess carry, tucked her into bed, and even told her a bedtime story while sitting by her side. The next morning, Nabai woke to find him beside her. A warm feeling welled up inside her, and she couldn't resist reaching out to touch him. When he freshened up to leave for school, Nabai was struck by how charming he looked. Hearing her words, the male lead smiled unconsciously, then slowly approached her, removed the hair tie from her wrist, and gently tied up her hair for her. Nabai gazed at his tenderness, her heart wavering once more. Unable to restrain his emotions any longer, yet after that night, their feelings grew quickly. The two agreed to meet once a week every Saturday. On the first Saturday, Nabai woke up early, dressed carefully, and anxiously waited for Jun. When he arrived, he noticed the table full of beer cans. Nabai hurried to explain it was only to lighten the mood. Jun, seeing her nervousness, didn't expose it. Instead, he took out a butterfly wind chime he had crafted himself and hung it by her bed. Then he squatted in front of her, his gentle gaze making Nabai even more certain of her feelings. Once again, they sank into tenderness. Gradually, Jun became part of her daily life, and Nabai grew accustomed to his company every night. At school, they pretended to be strangers, but in private, they often exchanged secret glances. In the evenings, they slipped into the rhythm of a normal couple, cooking together, eating together, sharing small habits that made them feel inseparable. But just when they had grown used to this way of being, John's ex-girlfriend Yoon's soul reappeared, unwilling to let their relationship continue smoothly. Cracks began to form between them. Most hurtful of all, John even forgot Nabai's birthday. Angry, Nabai called and said she would return home alone, refusing to celebrate with him. Jun failed to realize she was upset, and she hung up in frustration. Sitting alone on the bus in the pouring rain, Nabai encountered her childhood friend Do-hyuk. Excited to reunite after so long, she learned he was now a chef with his own restaurant near a university in Seoul. As her stop approached, Do-hyuk invited her to visit his restaurant and asked for her contact information. When the bus braked suddenly, his bag of potatoes spilled. Nabai crouched down to help him pick them up. The rain grew heavier, and suddenly an umbrella shielded her. But it was Do-hyuk who escorted her home. Without her noticing, he tilted the umbrella to protect her, leaving himself soaked on one side. At her doorstep, Nabai finally realized how thoughtful he was, and she couldn't help but think, if only I had met him earlier. On her birthday, Nabai stood listlessly in the subway. Suddenly, the male lead appeared. Seeing him that day filled her with joy. They wandered the city together, and he even bought her a gift. Just as she was about to treat him to dinner, she hesitated, suspecting he might still be entangled with another woman. Nevertheless, they returned to Nabai's place, where he offered to cook seaweed soup for her. Halfway through cooking, the male lead once again seduced her. Faced with the man she couldn't resist, Nabai gave in. But in the midst of their intimacy, his phone rang. It was Yoon Sol. Without hesitation, he dropped everything, got up, and answered the call, even lying smoothly as he spoke. Nabai realized he was leaving her for a second round elsewhere, but she could do nothing. Hungry, she glanced at the half-cooked seaweed soup and went out instead. At the supermarket, unable to find anything she wanted, she ended up at Do-hyuk's restaurant. Do-hyuk greeted her warmly, his smile like the arrival of spring. They happily reminisced about their childhood. He prepared a bowl of birthday noodles and even a piece of cake for her. Looking at him, Nabai thought, if only the male lead were like this. Do-hyuk shyly admitted he remembered her favorite cake flavor was chocolate. But he didn't realize that, in her heart, he was nothing more than a backup. Lighting candles for her, he looked at her in the glow, wishing time could stop right there. The next day, Nabai dressed up carefully in the outfit the male lead had given her, hoping to meet him again. They arranged to meet at the garden behind the school. Nabai arrived early, waiting at the promised spot. The male lead strolled over, wearing white sneakers, a lollipop in his mouth, looking carefree. Nabai shyly tried to change the subject. But when he kissed her suddenly, she pushed him away in panic, worried classmates might see. The male lead teased her, saying now she knew what he tasted like. Unfortunately, classmates did spot them. Soon, rumors of their romance spread across campus. Frustrated, Nabai returned home, only to find her ex-boyfriend waiting outside. He confronted her, saying, "Are you with the male lead? That man flirts with every woman." Nabai angrily pushed him away, disgusted by his words. Back home, she began reflecting on her recent love life, realizing it had indeed been messy. She resolved to cut ties with the male lead. But when she saw him again, his devastating charm left her speechless. Just then, an older man appeared and punched the male lead. Nabai instinctively shielded him, not knowing the situation. At the police station, she learned the man was Yoon Sol's older brother. The male lead had knowingly pursued Yoon Sol even while she had a boyfriend, enraging her brother. He warned the male lead to stay away from his sister, and kindly advised Nabai as well. Later, Nabai confronted the male lead. "Why are you dating other girls?" But the male lead dismissed it as unimportant and said he still wanted to maintain his relationship with her. Nabai asked, "What exactly are we?" He replied casually, "Didn't we agree it was fine before?" Unable to bear the rumors and his evasiveness, Nabai chose to let go. Looking at such a heartless man, she thought he was a complete bastard, turned, and walked away. Back home, she nearly threw out the clothes he had given her, but in the end, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Hugging them tightly, she cried the whole night. Although she tried to return to a normal life, she still thought of him often. One day, she found a gift hanging on her door, a pair of earrings and a necklace. She remembered that the night the angry man pushed her down, her necklace had broken. Nabai never expected that the male lead would notice such small details. She called him, only to find his number had already been disconnected. Later, they ran into each other in the stairwell. Nabai tried to return the necklace and earrings, but the male lead angrily told her to just throw them away. At that moment, her phone rang. Seeing it was Yoon Sol, the male lead answered directly. Hurt, Nabai turned and left. In truth, Yoon Sol had fallen ill, and out of concern for her friend, the male lead accompanied her to the hospital for a checkup. Noticing his tired and distracted expression, Yoon Sol asked what was wrong. He admitted he was weary of how things were and longed for change. On the day of the class presentation, Nabai was choosing assistants when the male lead immediately raised his hand. She was surprised, while he gazed at her deeply, reluctant to let go. Nabai, flustered, averted her eyes. Later, the two worked together in his studio. Though they claimed it was only about work, they matched seamlessly, and Nabai gradually rediscovered a familiar, comforting feeling. Watching them, Yoon Sol grew envious. One day, while Nabai went to buy water, Yoon Sol deliberately called the male lead, asking if she should cut her hair short. She even dropped his lighter on purpose. When Nabai saw it, she asked Yoon Sol what her relationship with the male lead really was. Yoon Sol boldly declared she was his ex-girlfriend, and that they were still seeing each other. After this, Nabai disappeared. Their classmates asked the male lead about her, but he had no idea. Distraught, he grew absent-minded, while Yoon Sol feigned ignorance. In reality, Nabai had returned to her hometown. From her aunt, she learned that Do Hyuk had also come back, planning to open his own noodle shop. A few days later, Nabai's friends finally reached her by phone. Discovering she was back home, they decided to visit her and, at the same time, try Do Hyuk's cooking. Embarrassed, Nabai asked them to keep it a secret and not let the male lead know she was there. Unable to find Nabai anywhere, the male lead eventually confided in Yoon Sol. Even she hadn't expected Nabai to pull away so suddenly. Realizing how much he truly cared, Yoon Sol admitted defeat and revealed what she knew about Nabai's whereabouts. Resolute, the male lead decided to seek her out and set things straight. Meanwhile, upon hearing of Nabai's return, Do Hyuk hurried to see her. The two met by the seaside, where he had prepared a lavish meal. Faced with such a thoughtful man, Nabai was surprised when he admitted he had never dated much. He explained that the women he liked always seemed to already have boyfriends. Slightly awkward, Nabai revealed she was currently single. Hearing this, Do Hyuk's face lit up with joy, and he toasted to the moment. He confessed that he had secretly liked her since they were young. When she left for Seoul, he had wanted to confess, but overhearing her say she had a boyfriend made him give up. In the end, he hadn't even gone to see her off. Nabai was shocked to realize such a small misunderstanding had kept them apart all these years. After clearing things up, their feelings warmed quickly. That night, after drinking, they sat together in the car. Do Hyuk spoke about how happy he was to see her again, but Nabai was already falling asleep beside him. Gently, he laid her down, covered her with a blanket, and spent the night outside the car watching over her. The next morning, when Nabai saw him curled up outside, she was deeply moved. At the same time, the male lead sat alone in Nabai's empty seat, lost in memories of their time together. Unconsciously, Nabai herself shaped her clay sculpture into his likeness. Just then, Do Hyuk appeared at the window, startling her into hiding it under a bag. Later, the two went cycling together. Do Hyuk filmed her laughter and carefree moments, filling his camera with her image. Seeing the photos, Nabai's happiness was plain to see. Meanwhile, the male lead's mother gave him a car as a birthday gift. As she prepared to leave for Paris, she gently advised him about life and love. Her words struck a chord, making him realize what truly mattered. Determined, he drove to Nabai's hometown. At that moment, Nabai and Do Hyuk were wandering the market together, shopping like a couple. When Nabai's bike tire burst, Do Hyuk had her ride with him, tying his jacket to shield her from the cold. Once again, Nabai was touched by his quiet attentiveness. But when the male lead arrived and saw her on the back of Do Hyuk's bike, smiling and chatting, his heart sank. Watching them leave together, his face darkened. Do Hyuk sensed the man's gaze and immediately knew he wasn't here with good intentions. Nabai couldn't bear the intensity of her gaze and had no choice but to turn around and go inside. After arranging the accommodations for everyone, Do Hyuk invited them to the amusement park. One by one, everyone set off, and since Nabai was the last to come out, she could only ride in the male lead's car, leaving the passenger seat for Do Hyuk. With the two rivals sitting together, the car became unusually quiet. Throughout the ride, the male lead kept glancing at the rearview mirror, and just then Nabai raised her head. Their eyes met, and Do Hyuk, sitting in the front seat, also clearly sensed the tension coming from the male lead. At the amusement park, seeing Nabai's face full of smiles, Do Hyuk couldn't help but grin along. He even won a stuffed toy for her. From a distance, the male lead's face darkened as he watched the two laughing and enjoying themselves. Even when they were lining up for the Ferris wheel, he looked at them with resentment, thinking Nabai must have done it on purpose. A close friend, who noticed the male lead's secret, deliberately dragged Do Hyuk away, creating an opportunity for Nabai and the male lead to be alone. On the Ferris wheel, Nabai gazed out the window and sighed at how beautiful the view was. The male lead, however, knelt down on one knee in front of Nabai and spoke softly. Seeing the familiar figure before her, Nabai felt her heart waver slightly. Later that evening, when everyone returned from the amusement park, Do Hyuk's younger sister, Do Hyun, immediately took a liking to the male lead and eagerly went up to greet him. During the barbecue, Do Hyun kept clinging to the male lead, which left Nabai sulking on the side. A friend, noticing Nabai's mood, asked why she always avoided the male lead. Nabai replied sadly that the male lead already had a girlfriend, so she shouldn't try to set them up anymore. When the group noticed how close Nabai and Do Hyuk seemed, they curiously asked how the two had met. Do Hyuk explained that they were childhood friends and even revealed that Nabai was his first love. Nabai glanced at the male lead, but he seemed indifferent. Later, everyone began playing a game of Whisper Secrets. After a few rounds, Do Hyuk left, and Do Hyun seized the chance to ask the male lead a question. Shortly after, she went off to drink alone in frustration. The others, curious, rushed to her side to ask what she had asked. Nabai was the only one left in the dark. Everyone else continued the game happily, while the male lead sat apart, seemingly detached. The others began teasing, asking if the girl the male lead liked was among them. When Do Hyun accidentally cut herself, Nabai quickly took her to get the wound bandaged. Do Hyun then asked Nabai what her relationship with the male lead really was. Nabai denied it, but Do Hyun remained unconvinced. She revealed that her question had actually been, "Who is the person the male lead most wanted to kiss tonight?" Nabai froze for a moment, brushing it off by saying the male lead was just the type who liked to joke around. After Do Hyun left, the male lead suddenly appeared. He was the only one who noticed that Nabai's arm was also scratched. Gently, he applied medicine to Nabai's wound and blew softly on it. Nabai felt like she couldn't breathe, sinking once again into the male lead's tender aura. She tried to escape, but the male lead scooped her up in his arms. In the end, Nabai couldn't resist and kissed him back. But soon after, Nabai came to her senses. As she left, she ran into Do Hyun, and the two walked along a country path. For her confession, Do-hyun had carefully prepared balloons and fairy lights. He then pulled out a bouquet of flowers and finally confessed his feelings to Nabai. But the rejection card is universal. Nabai still turned him down. She admitted that the reason she had hidden away in her hometown was all because of the male lead. Do-hyun asked if that meant she was planning to get back together with him. Nabai firmly said no. Although Do-hyun had already expected rejection, seeing Nabai's tear-streaked face, he opened his arms to hug her, only to be left hanging. From a distance, the male lead saw Do-hyun returning dejectedly with the flowers in hand and immediately knew that his confession to Nabai had failed. Do-hyun then warned the male lead to stay away from Nabai, saying that Nabai had called her time with him a disgraceful past. The male lead gave a bitter smile. When the holiday ended, Nabai had to return to school, but not a single person came to see her off. Ever since Nabai broke up with the male lead and rejected her backup suitor, her world instantly grew quiet. But in truth, neither man had given up on pursuing her. Just before her car was about to depart, Do-hyuk still showed up. Nabai was very surprised to see him. After all, she had just rejected him the day before. Yet he had carefully prepared sweets for her and reminded her to be safe on the road. Perhaps because of the sting from his failed confession, Do-hyuk waited until after he got out of the car to call Nabai, telling her he would never give up on her. When Nabai returned home, she received yet another call from him. But in reality, she had been waiting for the male lead's call all along. Knowing Nabai loved chocolate, Do-hyuk decided to become a pastry chef and even told her that he would come to Seoul in a few days. Nabai, too embarrassed to refuse directly, simply agreed and said she would treat him to a meal when he arrived. Meanwhile, after returning to school, the male lead's work began receiving attention from VCU. When Nabai learned that he might be going to the US to study, she went to find him, though she felt a little downhearted. The male lead then brought her to the exhibition hall, only for Nabai to realize this was the very place where her ex-boyfriend had once displayed a sculpture of her seductive pose in bed. She resisted going further, as the memory left her with a bitter taste. But to the male lead, this place was filled with meaning. When they crossed paths again later at a bar, the male lead became convinced that their encounters were destiny. But Nabai refused to believe in such a laughable fate. To win her back, the male lead even became a model for her art class. None of the students could believe that someone so handsome would pose for them, since it wasn't at all like him. Only Nabai understood. He had come solely for her. And whenever he sat among the students, his eyes would always wander to her. A few days later, Do-hyuk really did come to Seoul to see Nabai, bringing along a homemade lunch. Nabai was delighted by his cooking, but just then, the male lead happened to see their intimate moment. His expression darkened, and he walked away in disappointment. Later, Nabai showed Do-hyuk her artwork, and he couldn't help but praise her. Looking at the warm and gentle Do-hyuk, Nabai felt for a fleeting moment as if she were standing between two men at once. After sending him off, she grew disappointed with herself and wandered the streets aimlessly, only to find herself back in the alley where she had first met the male lead. Memories came rushing in, and right at that moment, the male lead called her. What she didn't know was that he was already walking toward her from behind. Their eyes met, taking them both back to the day they first encountered each other. This time, neither crossed the line. They simply walked together, with the male lead following quietly behind Nabai to see her home. Meanwhile, Do-hyuk told his friends about his progress with Nabai. They all agreed that now was the best time to confess again, encouraging him to go for it. Overjoyed, Do-hyuk hurried to Nabai's place, only to run into her and the male lead arriving together. Nabai told the male lead to wait downstairs while she went up to gather some things. But when Do-hyuk spotted them, he stubbornly insisted on going upstairs with her. Not knowing the truth, he misunderstood, believing that Nabai and the male lead had rekindled their romance. Crushed, he stood frozen in place, unable to speak. Inside, the male lead noticed a butterfly ornament on Nabai's windowsill, stirring a rush of familiar feelings. This was a place filled with their sweetest memories. Though Nabai packed his belongings to send him away, he sat down beside her, gently took her arm, and spoke with light humor. Relaxing, Nabai accidentally met his gaze, and the atmosphere shifted. The male lead leaned in for a kiss, but this time, Nabai pushed him away. She got up and opened the fridge to cool her head, but the male lead, unwilling to give up, followed her and held her shoulders, speaking with deep emotion. That night, Nabai lay awake, staring at the wind chime he had once made for her, unsure how much of his words were sincere. The next day, weighed down by her emotional turmoil, Nabai fell behind on her work, and her chance to study abroad in France was revoked. Back in his hometown, Du Hyuk watched a video of Nabai, his heart aching with longing. He still hadn't given up and called her again. But just then, the male lead, who had come intending to comfort Nabai, stumbled upon the scene. Seeing that she turned to Du Hyuk for support rather than him, he walked away in silence, heartbroken. The male lead couldn't help but feel that Nabai had been drifting farther away. Meanwhile, Du Hyuk, hearing the sadness in Nabai's voice over the phone, resolved to return to Seoul once more. That evening, before the male lead dropped Nabai off, he took out a bracelet he had crafted by hand and gently fastened it on her wrist. Nabai didn't refuse, giving him a flicker of renewed hope. But the very next day, while eating together, Nabai received a call. It was Du Hyuk, saying he had come to see her. Overjoyed, she immediately left, abandoning the male lead in despair. Du Hyuk gifted Nabai a photo album he had made from pictures of her by the seaside and admitted that he had actually seen the male lead enter her house that day. At the time, he confessed, he nearly went crazy with jealousy. Nabai instantly understood the truth. But when she returned home, she found the male lead waiting at her doorstep, drenched from the rain. He had seen Du Hyuk too but had chosen not to tell her. Nabai felt once again that the male lead was toying with her. The male lead, on the other hand, accused her of breaking his heart. For the first time, Nabai was utterly disappointed. Leaving him in the rain, she went inside. After crying bitterly, Nabai dragged herself to school in low spirits, only to see something that devastated her even more. Her project, which she had worked on for an entire semester, had been shattered by a fallen fan. With graduation approaching, this was nothing short of a thunderbolt from the blue. Meanwhile, the male lead was packing up, preparing to leave everything behind, when he suddenly received a phone call. He rushed to the school and, seeing Nabai slumped on the ground, his face filled with heartbreak. Looking at the fragments scattered across the floor, he crouched down slowly and, with a serious expression, encouraged her to start over again. From then on, the two of them poured themselves wholeheartedly into their work. There were no more blurred lines of ambiguity between them, only passion for their art. This new kind of relationship made Nabai feel completely free and at ease. The male lead also deliberately kept his distance. He no longer offered to walk her home. Yet, whenever he saw Nabai asleep, he would gently cover her with a blanket, and soon their project was finished in time. With tears in his eyes, the male lead wished Nabai success in her exhibition. He wanted to say more, but feared upsetting her, so he turned and walked away quietly. Watching his lonely back, Nabai's tears fell uncontrollably. After that day, the male lead disappeared, but Nabai could not find happiness. Lonely and despondent, she wandered the streets and alleys, yet everywhere she went, memories of the male lead resurfaced. One day, she accidentally stumbled upon a sketchbook he had left behind. Seeing herself in his drawings, she could no longer suppress her longing for him. On the day of the exhibition, Nabai wore the bracelet the male lead had given her. Du Hyuk also came, bringing flowers to congratulate her. But when he caught sight of the male lead's figure, he quickly put the bouquet back. By the time he chased after him, the male lead was already gone. Later, Du Hyuk approached Nabai. He knew she did not truly love him. Filled with guilt, Nabai looked at him, but instead he thanked her. He said she had given him a special kind of emotional experience, and that she need not feel guilty. Then, he gave her the flowers as a farewell gift and quietly bowed out of her life. At the celebration banquet, Nabai saw couples everywhere, and she couldn't help but feel envious. Leaving early, she was drawn, as if by fate, back to the exhibition hall. There, she saw a familiar figure standing in front of her artwork. Her heart was overwhelmed, and though she scolded him for disappearing and then showing up again only to shake her resolve, deep inside she was moved. The male lead could not find words to respond and lowered his head in silence. When he saw Nabai wearing the bracelet he had made, he finally realized she still held feelings for him. After a long silence, Nabai reached out and held his hand. The male lead smiled. This time, it was Nabai who leaned forward and kissed him. From that moment, the two of them began their sweet romance. Though other girls still tried to approach the male lead, he had finally learned how to refuse. The playboy of the sea had at last found his home, and the two of them returned to their playful, intimate days together. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and drop a heart if you love the series.